It was human reaction to a massive change. So what we really missed was being together. We didn't miss being in our office. True complex problem solving, I think we've all seen happen best in person. And we're modeling the space to that behavior. It was this complete change in the way everybody had worked. If we don't know why we're building the space, I don't understand why we're building anything. What was happening was leaders were there. Show up rates were over 90%. You have to know all this other stuff, or you can't possibly succeed in building space. I'm not at all advocating that you drive to the office and stare at Excel all day. That's the balance, I think, that everybody's trying to find, that we give people the ultimate level of choice. Yes, it was a nicer space. There's also broader reasons we build space. What's the metrics of success for the building? And we blew away those targets within the first year. You're going to get a very different message singing it over a coffee with the CEO than you are going to get over video. Where are we succeeding? What are we trying to push into? What areas aren't working? Why aren't they working? And then use space as a tool where I can to help those people solve that problem. It's not just four walls and a desk and free coffee. That's not going to help anybody solve a problem anymore.
Is the biggest workplace problem today really about space, or is it about leadership, understanding how to use it as a tool to accomplish the organization's goals? Hi, I'm Bob Fox, and this is What the F is Happening to the Office, a show about how work, the workplace, and the people who shape it are evolving. We talk with the experts who are driving change, leaders in design, real estate, technology, and culture, to help organizations create environments that actually work. If you care about the future of work, our work environments, and want an unfiltered view into what's next, you're in the right spot. And we want you to be a part of the conversation, so be sure to subscribe, like, and comment. Today's guest is Ray Milora, Senior Director of Workplace Design and Construction at Cisco. Ray transformed the work environment at GSK's headquarters in Philadelphia and now leads workplace strategy at Cisco. He shares how Cisco's fully integrated tech stack eliminates friction from hybrid work and why that frees up a space to become a tool for engagement, not a barrier. He makes the case that it's not amenities that bring people back to the office, it's leadership, presence, and purpose. We'll also talk about the surprising ways Cisco measures success, from talent attraction to sales impact, and we'll also review how Ray uses AI to accelerate design and strategy in a matter of hours, not months. Ray, welcome. It's great to have you here.
Thanks, Bob. It's great to be back on video and audio with you after all these years.
It's been 10 years since you were at GSK in Philadelphia, and they had gone from 800,000 square feet to 200,000. And it was a transformational project. And you shared a story about how large numbers of staff initially resisted and even left the company. And I'm wondering if you can share a little bit of that story about what happened with that project.
Okay, so let me try to put the Wayback Machine on mentally. I was going to make a joke on our, the last time you and I were on video together, neither of us had white hair or gray hair. So that should put into perspective how long it's been since we've been on video. So anyway, it was a really fascinating project at its time. And it's kind of interesting looking at it now in 2025 as compared to 2011 when that project started, right? It doesn't seem like it was that long ago, but it was a long time ago, and in workplace design and strategy and all that kind of stuff. And GSK, like many companies at that time, and especially pharmaceutical companies, it was highly traditional. It was offices and cubes, and it was just sort of that was the way. And there was these fascinating, if you got promoted, you got into a slightly bigger office or a bigger cube, and you started to get plants. We had all these things that that we all joke about, that we layered into this thing we call working in an office. And you can imagine the initial Band-Aid pull for everybody when we revealed some images of the new space. And I didn't reveal it, actually. It was a woman at the time named Deirdre Connolly, who was leading U.S. Pharmaceuticals. And I think she was even on the board of the company. But she did this reveal, and it showed the complete opposite of that. So you could imagine not just the hush tone comments, but it was this complete change in the way everybody had worked. And we were suddenly going to activity-based working and stuff like that. There were people, I don't know how many actually left, but there were people who were like, I'm not moving. I can't work in that, and it had nothing to do with it being GSK. It was human reaction to a massive change in the work way. And I remember talking about it way back then, and I would say that all the time. It's like, it has nothing to do with our company, and nothing to do with GSK, nothing to do with any of that. We were completely upending the way that people had been brought up through corporate America or corporations, and the expectations that were layered on that, and to change all that overnight is what it felt like to a lot of people. But what was fascinating was the impact that it had. You fast forward to when the building opened, show up rates were over 90%, I think, for the first 2 or 3 years. It just transformed everything, right? What we boiled it down to then was, yeah, it was a cool building, and yes. But you get through that after about the first 2 weeks. What was happening was leaders were there. You walked in the space and you saw leaders behind, they were right there. You could walk up to them. They didn't have an office either, and it was the first time for me working in a workplace where I really realized the power and the impact that leadership has on space, way more than space has on space. Yes, it was a nicer space. Absolutely. You could see the sun. You could see outside. You weren't buried in this queue. But that goes away in like 6 months, right? But leadership and access and growth potential and fear of missing out, all that kind of stuff became very real for me on that project. And it's been sort of a guiding principle for me since.
So what do you see in terms of the leadership presence that directly impacts office attendance?
I think it shortens the distance for people to problem solving, learning, especially early in career, right? You know, you and I now are later in career, right? So, we have an opportunity to interact with folks early in career and talk to them about what we've learned, mistakes we've made, all that. That is like insanely valuable, especially when you do it in person, because there's that human connection thing there. I think you feel more attached to a company, and this is not me under the covers here saying everybody should go back to the office, because I don't believe that, by the way. But I think you should go back if leaders are there, because leaders activate space. They activate opportunity. They give you that sort of education in the culture of the company and so on. You can interact with them. That kind of stuff is invaluable when you're building a career. Even for me later in career, invaluable. Be able to sit down with the CEO face to face. You're going to get a very different message sitting in over a coffee with the CEO than you are going to get over video. You just are. And you could ask real questions and you can get real answers, So yeah, I mean, that's what I've learned.
How would you guide leaders, or what advice would you give them to best utilize the space?
Yeah, I touched on it, but it's activating it, right? So we always call it activation space. But for me, that is, you host events, you have team gatherings. Like Cisco just did earnings last week, right? So it's an opportunity for leaders this week to say, hey, everybody, we're going to meet in room XYZ or down in the cafeteria and we're going to have coffee and stuff. And I can answer questions about the numbers, what's behind the numbers, why our growth targets are what they are, why we're moving into this area and not this area. And you could do it in this live setting where people can actually then interact with each other. I mean, there's such value to that. And I think if we learned anything in COVID at all about office space, so what we really missed was being together. We didn't miss being in our office. We just missed being together, And so we're trying to create opportunities for that to happen, learning events, bringing it out. We could bring in you, Bob, as an outside speaker and be like, Bob's going to tell you everything he knows about architecture and what works and what doesn't. I mean, those kind of things we know it from being in our trades, right? We go to a job site and it is a very different update that we get when we have a hard hat on walking around than we do if somebody was just on video saying, well, Bob, the project's going well. Construction's moving along. I mean, yeah, that's an update. But when you're standing there, like in our trade and what we do for a living, we stand there with a hard hat on and everything. And you're like, yeah, we're moving along, but what the hell is that? You can ask questions and really interact. That's where I think clued in leaders, when they get it, they're doing that. They're doing the same thing you and I would do when we go to a job site. We're engaging. We're shaking hands. Hey, meeting the people in the trades and saying, what can I do to help you? What's not working for you? Are we being slow in decision making? You could do that level of interaction. Could you do it with video? Yeah, sure. But it's not the same. It's just not the same. So
it's that social interaction and the collaboration and the immediate, almost immersive kind of environment.
Passing on learning, those kind of things, answering questions person didn't even know they want to ask. I'm not at all advocating that you drive to the office and stare at Excel all day. You stare at somebody on video all day. I'm not advocating that at all. Why would we do that? And I'd be fascinated, anybody who happens to listen to this, I'd be fascinated right now going through, they're like, yeah, I haven't really sat with my leader in a while, or sat with my leader's leader, or been into this or been into that, or had a learning opportunity. I mean, I think no matter where you are in your career, there's benefit to that kind of stuff, especially early in career, especially early.
Well, let's talk about Cisco. You've been at Cisco for quite a while now, and
Yeah,
I
it's
think
crazy.
Cisco is unique in that, it's a technology company and there's still hybrid work that goes on. But how does the use of Cisco's technology change the hybrid experience?
Yeah. I mean, and I promise not to sound like a Cisco commercial here, but this is the first place I've worked where, well, let me back up. So I obviously have a huge cheat code because I work here, right? So I know the people who literally build our collaboration gear. In fact, I have a call with one of the guys after we're doing this, right? So I literally get to interact with people who are making the gear. So I get to ask a completely different level of question, challenge on stuff. They ask me stuff. They're thinking, hey, we're thinking about putting this into a product. Would people like you use it? Because I'm sort of the prototypical. They just look at me as guy in real estate, and I'm able to answer questions, that kind of stuff. I have a cheat code on that, and I have a cheat code that I know the direction of where we're taking stuff. So if I'm going to build space, right, you know, those of us that are listening to this at Build Space, we all know that it's kind of hard to change a wall once you put up a wall, right? It's a whole nother project and stuff like that. So I have downward vision to know that if I put certain things in, that we're going to be good for the next 7 or 8 years with that. So that really helps. It really helps knowing that kind of stuff. Plus, I also know exactly what our technology needs to work at its optimum, the size of the room, the placement on the wall. And by the way, we share all that outbound, but I just have direct access to the people who do it, and I get them involved in my projects. We just opened up a space in Austin. We have people interacting on that from the sales side, from the engineering side, literally that are out there selling and using this stuff because they're giving this insight on, a better way to hang that would be this, or we find our customers are using it this way, right? And then obviously the biggest advantage is when you're at Cisco, in any Cisco building, we're all on one platform. It is not a mixed environment. You're not going into a Teams room, in a Zoom room, into this room, into that room. It's one thing. And it's our switches in the closet, and it's our wireless access points, and it's our cameras, and it's all our stuff. And when people arrive at a Cisco office, their first comment is, why does everything work seamlessly? And we're like, well, we're all on one platform. And that's really I mean, I know you've been in environments. GSK was in an environment where it was not a single platform, right? It's all mixed environments. And we also work really well. We play well in the sandbox with others. Like a device I have on my desk here, I can just click a button, I can get into a Zoom meeting, get into a Teams meeting, that kind of stuff. So the interoperability is there. That all comes with when I build a building. All that's already solved. And the other thing is everybody knows how to get off mute in Cisco because every meeting's a WebEx meeting. So it's already baked in.
I'm wondering, when somebody walks into the conference room for a meeting, does it take them 15 minutes to hook up to the technology?
No, it doesn't. See, and that's the thing, right? Think about all that for a second. Forget what we do for a living. Think about all that for a second. I don't have that problem. I don't have this problem. Huge burden is lifted for me, like giant burden is lifted for me. And then, when I build space, we awash it in technology. So we ignite and activate every corner of the building with technology. So we give people the ultimate level of choice. I want to be in a meeting room. I want to be in an open room. I want to go stand over there in the hallway. I don't care, wherever it is, right? So we light it all up. That's our differentiator with space, is we know our kit. We're a single platform. It works seamlessly, except all the stuff I just said. Plus, we put it everywhere because we allow the ultimate in choice for the end users, employees, whoever's in there. We're not dictating to you how to use space. And then I think we also have now pushed into trying out different things to lower the cost to do this. Last time you and I spoke, I was telling you, we work with a furniture manufacturer and we have a credenza. Say you have a device on the wall and there's a credenza below it, right? Well, we actually put a back plane on the credenza. It's made out of MDF. We mount the device to the credenza instead of the wall. If I'm not putting it on the wall, I know you know this, I don't have to put blocking and all this kind of stuff on the wall. I don't have to worry about 6 months from now if I want to put something twice as big, I got to take all the blocking out and move the ball. I don't have to do any of that. I just hang it on the back plane. Worst case, the back plane breaks, I put on a new back plane. There's one outlet and one data drop if I need it, so it makes, for me, it's a lot faster to build that way because I can switch out furniture's furniture. Like we can just switch it out. It's no big deal. Getting into construction is a whole different kind of a layer. So it allows me to kind of wander into that mindset too. because I'm not worrying about people getting off mute anymore. Now I can go, now what am I really worried about? How can I do this faster? How can I create a space that I can change faster, that can be more flexible, that if 2 years from now, some bespoke team comes into this neighborhood and they, I don't know, whatever they do, all the furniture needs change. I'm just moving furniture. I'm not like, oh, put up the plastic, take the walls down. I don't have to do that kind of stuff. So it's allowing me the opportunity to lean into that, which I think is where I'm truly driving change in the design and creation of space.
We talked earlier also about the business outcomes and how you're using some of the technology. And I'm wondering if you can share with us how some of that works, how you're looking at the business as a tool, basically, the space as a business tool.
Yeah, I think when we chat a little bit, I'll give some recent examples, but we built a space in Atlanta not very long ago, a couple of years ago now. It's actually probably longer than I think because time is like flying. But I think it was like 2-3 years ago. We had some other space in the Atlanta area, and we had some lease events coming up. So there were some triggers on why we were doing this. But when we decided where to go, what we quickly realized is that Georgia Tech has been one of the companies that Cisco has historically hired from and hired a lot of people from. In fact, our CFO, who's retiring right now, he graduated from Georgia Tech, and he lives in Atlanta. So, but we were kind of nowhere near Georgia Tech. I mean, we were in the greater Atlanta area, but we certainly weren't directly across the street from Georgia Tech like we are now. The building we leased is the Coda building. We're literally looking down at the campus. In fact, I hung the sign, the Cisco sign, on the side of the building that faces the campus. And we did that for a bunch of reasons, because when we looked at, okay, what's the metrics of success for the building? What we didn't want to get stuck in the trap of, I think, and what we're trying really hard to is saying, margin rate and utilization and all that. Is that important? Of course it is. But there's also broader reasons we build space. For us, hiring from Georgia Tech was a pretty broad reason. I can't share specific numbers and all that, but we had targets, hiring targets we put in, and we blew away those targets within the first year because of proximity, because of access. The building, it's kind of an interesting building. It has I'm going to say this wrong, and someone's going to call me as soon as I heard it say, you said it wrong. There's a spiral staircase in the building. It goes up like 20 stories or something, 21. It's like evidently one of the tallest in the States. And I'm afraid of heights, so I've never been on it, full disclosure. But it goes up the front, and there's these little, it comes up, and there's like a mezzanine, and then the elevator bank, and then, the leased space for offices. The reason I'm sharing that is that Georgia Tech students, they have badge access to that building, and they could use those mezzanines to study up until like midnight, from like 6 a.m. to midnight or something like that. So we literally have Georgia Tech computer science students studying right outside our door, literally outside the door. So you want to talk about access.
Yeah, that's great.
It's been amazing from that. The other reason we built it, well, it's a primary reason we build everything is for our employees, right? But outside of that, hiring is a big one. And then as a showcase of our technology. And, I'm not in sales. I'm not going to quote numbers. I'm not going to do that kind of stuff. But we use Salesforce. Our sales teams do just like everybody else. And my understanding is the way we sort of track a sale and stuff. If you and I, say I was in sales and this was the first chat you and I were having about products, that would be logged as, opportunity with Bob. Ray had the conversation, and where are you on the curve? Am I converting you into a customer or, whatever, right? There's this whole process for it. Well, we have proof that that building is literally closing sales because people are coming in and seeing it and going, yeah, okay, I want all this. This is what I want. Where do I sign? Because they're seeing it in situ, and they're seeing it in such a way that they're seeing the power of a single platform, the way all of our technology works, our approach to workspace design, all that kind of stuff, all is an amalgam. Where I think if they go to other places, they'll see somebody did a great job on workplace design. Because I'm not saying I know how to do this best at all. I'm not saying that. Lots of people can. But I think other people will see approaches, but they'll have a mixed technology environment. So they'll be like, yeah, it looks cool, but it's just not, with us, you're seeing the whole ball of wax, right? So it's actually closing sales. So if you think about just those two examples, space is driving hiring, talent attraction, and space is driving sales. I've never been able to say that in my career building space at all. The closest I got to GSK was we recreated a bunch of labs, a lot of labs, and we were able to show in one chemistry lab how compound production rose after they moved into the new space from where they were. Because the sciences are, you can't say the space gave Bob the breakthrough idea to solve problem X, right? That's kind of hard to That's a bit of fuzzy math going on there if you try to do that. But so we try to say what things we can actually measure, and we saw it. So it's kind of the holy grail when you find that it's not about not just about utilization, how many people showed up, that kind of thing, or tying it to a fuzzy number around productivity. I'm not a fan of productivity as a measure because I think it's damn near impossible to
Well,
prove unless, yeah.
what I love about that story is that, you're providing an experience for people, and that
Mhm.
experience is directly related to the purpose of the organization. And you're
Yeah,
bringing students in and you're integrating them into the experience of the company.
you got it. Yeah, and they're seeing it firsthand, right? They're seeing the culture, they're seeing who we are, they're seeing what we're able to do, and they're seeing it in brand new space, right? We have old buildings too. I don't want everybody thinking, oh, every single one of our buildings looks like Atlanta.
Another story that you shared with me was your experience using AI and trying to figure that out, and how you
Yeah,
took somebody's idea and kind of, leveraged the AI to bring back an image of what they were describing.
yeah. So this will wander into uh, uh, things our architecture friends listening know all too well about. So we had a meeting with a very senior leader in Cisco about a specific space that we're looking to redo and to sort of renovate and stuff like that. And making a very long story short, I think we all know how this goes, right? We have a discussion turns into requirements get vetted, we then write a brief, the brief gets reviewed. You kind of go through all these stages, you do some programming, eventually you bring in your partners, you get it into 3D space, so you can look at, you go through all this kind of stuff. There's all these stages, right? Everybody does a little bit different, but we're all doing the same damn thing, right? We're all trying to turn words into we can go, is this what you want? Right? That's essentially what we're trying to do, is take a conversation and go, I think I heard you, you want this, right? Well, the individual I had the conversation with, there was no way I was going to take that long to get back around, especially because of the criticality of the space. So it was a Monday, late afternoon, East Coast time. He was on the West Coast, got off the call, sat there for about 20 minutes, sort of absorbing all the notes that I took. And I should comment here that I have the capability to let AI note take in WebEx, and I didn't do that because I knew this individual well enough. I knew his speech patterns. I knew the kind of things he liked and didn't like from other conversations. I felt more confident just in that instant of taking the notes myself, because I knew he was going to say something, and I knew, like, he would use sort of a general term, but I would know what he was targeting, right? So I knew I could do that translation. So I wrote everything down. And I was looking at my notes, and I started to type. I had dinner, started to type, got some sleep, woke up way too early, and I was like, all right, I know what I got to do. And I erased everything else I had typed, and I started typing over. And I wrote a 2-page brief based on that conversation, describing that space. And then pretty quickly, I opened up ChatGPT on my phone, and I took the various paragraphs for the way I described space, and I rendered the space in ChatGPT. That took about 30 minutes. The first 5 to 10 of was me getting my prompt right. And were the images perfect? No, not at all. I also didn't say anything about Cisco in those prompts because I was using an external tool. Because this is a fascinating comment actually. At the time, this is about a month or so ago, our internal tool couldn't render images. Now it can. So that's the speed we're going at change with AI. Now I don't need to use ChatGPT. I can use my own internal tool. But that said, so I made sure not to say anything Cisco or put in Cisco Blue or anything like that, right? Got my prompts right. Started cranking out on these little images of the space. I looked at them. I'm like, that's good enough. It's close enough what I'm trying to do. Encapsulated those into the brief. I basically just wrote in a Word, inserted the images, and I sent it back to the guy 12 hours after the conversation. Literally turned around a brief with visuals in 12 hours. He was traveling those 2 days. He was traveling like to India, I think, or somewhere far away. So he wasn't exactly on top of his messaging, because of all the flights and stuff. He got back to me about 48 hours later when he came back from his trip. And I won't say exactly what he said, but basically he was like, perfect. That's exactly what I want. I then turned that over to our architecture team, our partners. They turned around because of the depth of what I wrote in the brief, and we already had a 3D model in Revit. They were able to render the space in about 4 or 5 days, not even. In 3D space. Was it perfect? But it was rendered, and you could just see my images sort of dotted throughout. And they're like, you talked about this on this image, that's represented here. You talked about this, right? It's good enough kind of a thing. We handed that to our cost estimating team. Took them about 4 days, not 4 days, because there was a weekend in there, called 5 days because of the weekend. And they came back to me with ROM, I'd say not quite 30, probably closer to 40 pricing. So in 2 weeks, I went from a conversation to a priced layout of the floor.
That's pretty impressive.
Yeah. And the point of all this is I wasn't going for right. I was going for, is this what you said you wanted? Because if it is, this is kind of where you're talking about on cost. This was not production ready at all, what I did at all. And it was not trying to be production ready, but it saved me. Well, you do this, Bob. How many months did it save me? Yeah, you've worked for clients, right? How
Oh,
client churn,
probably,
right?
yeah,
Meeting after meeting after meeting after
2 or
meeting
3
after
months.
meeting,
Yeah.
months and months and months and months and months worth of work. And I think for me, for what I do for a living, for what we do for a living, that showed me the power of the tool because it can get me faster to, is this what you said? Without wasting everybody's time producing something I produce and go, that's not what I want. We go, oh shit, okay. And then we go back and we start all over again, right? It's getting that translation from words to visual faster. Because remember, generally speaking, we're interacting with people that don't do what we do for a living. Why would they know what square foot looks like? If you say to them, what do you want, 50,000 square foot? How the hell? They don't know what that means.
Right.
They don't know 10,000 over 5,000 over 2 over. And no offense to anybody, that's what we do for a living. So we can go, yeah, that feels like 50,000. They don't know that. So the faster I can get to a visualization, say, is this what you want? And not just look and feel, but flow, goes to placement of stuff. Let me explain to you why I did this. Yeah, it's exactly what I want. Okay. And then I can show them a price and be like, it's trending towards X. Yeah, I can only afford half of X. Great. I'll be back to you in a week. Because then I can go back and make modifications. You notice I simplified this, I removed that. We're not redoing the bathrooms. Like, I don't know, whatever it is, right? And I brought it down to the number you said. Do you still want to do this?
The creative problem solving piece of the puzzle here was you describing to the AI what the problem was and how you were solving it.
Yeah, because our internal AI brain doesn't know how to do that yet. It does now because I fed the brief into our internal AI machine. Is it going to be perfect next time? Nah. But again, I'm not going for perfect. I'm going 70% right now is fine because 70% is a lot further than zero.
Yeah.
Right. And I'm speeding up. Historically, and this was a GSK2, the beginning took longer than the actual build. Once we get into construction, right, then it's on us. Then it's on the trades. And we're dealing with the things we deal with in construction. Weather, tariffs now, material shortages, whatever. AI can't solve that. AI is not swinging hammer, right? So that's on us. We got to figure out ways on that. But I think corporations like us spend a whole lot of time on the upfront trying to translate, Bob said X, but Ray heard Y. It's like, okay, how do I shorten the distance between those? What I translated could have been wildly wrong, but at 12 hours later, I would have known if I was wildly wrong or not, instead of 3 months later or whatever, and engaging all these people and spending all this money and wasting everybody's time. It's just shortening my distance. So is this what you said? You said this, right? Yeah, that's exactly what I want. There you go. Or that's kind of what I want. I want it blue instead of green. Great. Like whatever. Like I wasn't trying to prove myself smart or right or anything. I was just trying to make sure I was hearing what you were saying. And it was incredibly powerful for that because it was 100% in my control. By the way, I did it on my phone.
Wow. Well, and what I find interesting too is you had the insight to not use the AI to record the meeting notes, that knew that was going to somehow distort the interpretation of it.
100%. And, you'll find this part fast. I think I mentioned this last time we spoke. When I was originally, getting the prompt right thing is absolutely fascinating. So when I was originally writing what I wrote in there, and it doesn't matter all the words I use and everything, but I was saying what was I saying? Sorry. I used the word create. And when I kept getting back, I'm like, that's not what I want. I removed the word create and put in visualize and I actually got what I wanted.
Interesting.
Go figure. Figure. Another thing I found, the images, the way I wrote it and everything, they were overly moody to me. Like the image looked very moody. So I ended my prompt with, and make it dramatic, not moody.
Wow. That's pretty cool.
And why would I know that? Well, because I went to school for design. It's like, of course, that's right. That's where we bring in the human element to this stuff. That we're able to look at something and know the word to describe that because we'll fall back on what we do for a living. Like, how long have you been an architect, Bob, right? You would know that too. You'd be like, it's way too moody. The average person wouldn't know that. They'd be like, why does it look weird? Like we know what weird looks like. So we're using, this is a way, I think a lot of people are afraid of AI, but this is how you can really use it as a tool. It was just a tool for me, and I can't even tell you how many hours on my team of their time and our partners just chasing our tail, being like, that wasn't right. Oh God, here we go again.
So
Just cut all that up.
given that experience, I'm curious how you see it evolving. How will you use it next time?
I'm pretty confident in saying we are moving rapidly. That's how we will write briefs for every interaction we have, major interaction we have with our internal customers at Cisco. Customers for me are the different business unit. I use the word customers, right? But they're not, customers are who we sell stuff to, but my internal business stakeholders are that's what I will do. If I have a discussion about space, we will translate it, we will write it down, and we will create images and say, is this what you said? And we will turn it around overnight because anybody can do it. Well, at least the people I'm putting in the hands of can do it, right? Because I have people that this is what they do for a living. We're then going to create templates in different ways to train other people who have client engagements. So AI can do it for them. So they can say, hey, we had that meeting about the refreshing the coffee and tea point. Even something like simple stuff. It's just such a powerful way to be like, I heard you say this. Is that right? And it's going to look like that's what you want, right? Yeah. They sign it. We stick it into our system. Now we have client sign off internally that that's what you said you wanted. So it goes to finance and everybody's like, oh. And think about our finance friends, right? We're always up there asking for money. That's what people say, right? We're not, but that's the way it often looks. Now we can say to them, this is what we're building. And instead of just like a paragraph, well, we're building a new building that's going to house 200 people and it's going to be a call center, right? Instead of just have a bunch of words that people go, oh, okay. We could say, here's the brief. It's a page long and there's images. We're going to look at it and be like, and send it as a pre-read and people go, oh, I know exactly. That's cool. Okay, got it. Totally get what you're trying to do here. So I get really passionate about this kind of stuff because this translation and brief writing and stuff has always been an Achilles heel for me in what I do. I'm guessing it's probably been for you too. There's always a breakdown somewhere. I thought you said X, but what you actually said was Y, or I heard you this way, but you meant this. If we can clean that up, if our industry can get better at that, then we can actually focus on the real problems.
Well, I'm curious, what's your expectation for the consultants that you engage with and how they're using it?
So we don't, that translation step, we don't use consultants for. That's on us. That's all internal. The partners and stuff who are downstream for that, and I've already gotten feedback because obviously I did this with our partner organizations. They're like, this is absolutely amazing. We've never been given a brief that detailed. They knew exactly what I wanted from them. That's why they turned it around in 3-4 days.
That's great.
There wasn't 17 meetings, 100 people, everybody going, does Ray mean X or what? Did he say blue? But I think he means green. It was none of that. It was super clear. I was like, this is what I want. Got it. And they handed it back to me.
Yeah.
And it removed all the other stuff, right? All the other stuff was gone. Sorry.
I think traditionally the amount of time there's a lot of that back and forth trying to get that concept right, trying to understand exactly what the client is looking for, in that.
Yeah. Or we overload the client meeting, right? Because everybody's like, I need to be there for the client meeting because I don't think you know how to listen to the client, right? There's always like that undertone. I need to be in the room. That's why I got to be in the room too. Yeah, everybody, let's go all in the room. And we send 30 people to a meeting with one person. And the person's totally overwhelmed. Like, why are all these people here? I just need a new building, so it just removes all that. And I think it allows us to actually do what our jobs are. And for me, the partners that I hire, it allows them to do what their job is in a very clear and concise way. And by the way, it's signed off on the bottom. So I'm not coming back and be like, just kidding. We're not going to do that. Now we're going to do this. Because then I can put it through change control. And then I can actually have put process around it and all these other kind of things, right? And shorten the distance from discussion to actually swinging a hammer. That's all I'm trying to do. I need to swing hammers faster.
Yeah. Yeah.
Because you know how long it takes to build space. You get into a big corporation, they go, we want to I don't know, lease these 2 floors. Can I have it next week? You're like, no, you can have it in a year and a half. That doesn't work. That doesn't work anymore. It's like, no, well, we're going to go, I don't know, we're entering this part of the market or there's some business, I don't know, whatever it is. We want it now, not a year and a half from now. But then at least you can break it down to, well, let me tell you what's really holding this up. Here we are in city X. And by the way, the minimum time for a permit in city X is 12 weeks. Sorry, there's literally nothing I can do about that. There's nothing. So you can really highlight what really is slowing it down. And it's not us. We're not slowing it down. It's like there's just things that you can't speed up. But if we can get all the other stuff out of the way, we can still shorten the time to delivery. right? I mean, I live in a world of scope, schedule, and budget. At the end of the day, it's scope, schedule, budget, scope, schedule, budget, scope, schedule, budget, right? Just trying to improve on schedule and budget. So, and define the scope.
You know,
Yeah.
One of the other things that we talked about were the metrics and looking at the metrics and how I think that the metrics themselves have evolved over time. And some of those traditional metrics are obsolete today.
I think so.
So I'm curious to get your insight on that and, what you're using or what you're looking at.
Yeah. I think it depends on the company that you work for, right? Some companies are still using traditional metrics and all that kind of stuff. But actually, it was funny. We were talking about this earlier this morning. But when we look at it, where the office adds value, we kind of look at it in 4 buckets, right? So and we kind of touched on these, but I'll put them into slightly different words now. For complex problem solving, nothing beats being together, being able to jump up at the whiteboard, being able to debate. Me and you being like, no, but yeah, you can do it on video, right? But true complex problem solving, I think we've all seen happen best in person when we're really trying. What's the Apollo movie when they were all, we got to fit this into the, like, that wasn't going to happen over video, right? They had to figure that thing out. Collaborative speed is another one for us. It's one thing for me to call you and be on video with you, but if we're stuck in a room all day together in a building, we're all there. We're just moving faster because we're also picking up on the rest of our body language. Like, you and I are only seeing each other from here up, right? Right now, I could literally be boring the hell out of you and you're tapping your foot and you can't wait to get off this meeting. I don't pick that up unless I'm in person, right? Yeah, but you know what I mean, right? You know, we touched on this earlier too, but career development. Earlier in career, I mean, come on. We see it in the trades. You come in a trade as an apprentice. Just suddenly launched on as a union carpenter. You come in as an apprentice. You're learning from other people. You're seeing the things. You know this, but a hobby of mine up until recently, because I'm getting too old, is I like to flip old houses and work on old houses, and I do most of the work myself. And some of the most incredible things I learned was from a mentor and a friend of mine who's since passed, but this guy Jim, and all he ever did was build houses and build stuff. I mean, that's it. And standing next to him, swinging a hammer next to him, it's pretty amazing the stuff you learn that it would never translate over video. The way he attacks a problem, the way he's doing this, the way he's doing, just these things, especially on old homes, you're like, what the hell did they build it like that for? He's like, oh, I'll show you. And you would never get that, unless you were with somebody. So I think career development is there. And then obviously the whole company culture thing, you can absorb it and be it to an extent remotely, but to really, I think, take it all on, it happens the most when you're in person. Now, again, I am not advocating everybody go back to the office. I want to make that clear, like for 10 other times. I don't believe in all this chatter about return to office. It depends on the company. It depends on who you are. It depends on what you do. There are opportunities to do everything I just mentioned that don't require you being there 5 days a week, unless your culture is 5 days a week. Jamie Dimon gets beat all up because he's making everybody come back, right? And saying, well, hey, we're 5 days a week kind of a thing. But he has decided that that's the way they work. That's okay. If you don't want to work that way, you can go across the street and work for somebody else and make the same money, by the way, bro.
Yeah.
But that's a leadership standpoint that he made, right? So it's either then it becomes on the individual. It's like, well, I don't want to do that. Okay, then go work somewhere else. You can't apply that all. You have to, yeah.
How do you see that translating into space? And, how do you see the industry or organizations kind of right-sizing their portfolios?
Yeah, it's a great question. I think, when I was at GSK, this was the case here at Cisco, and I think a lot of big companies, we are awash in space because a lot of it is dated space. And we don't use it because it's dated and it doesn't match our work product and our work process and the way we work today. So I think we're going to continue to see a reduction in overall space, but a rise in more bespoke, event-based, gathering-based, like those kind of things for those teams that work that way. We at Cisco still have engineering teams and all this other kind of stuff that are tethered because of what they do. They worked in COVID, they were still going in. And we have engineers that sit at electrical engineering benches with oscilloscopes and all the other stuff. You're not exactly taking that home, right? So I'm not talking about those folks. I mean, we have everybody does at GSK. We had chemists, biologists, right? They were all highly bespoke. But even those guys, GSK, the data crunching, they didn't sit in front of a fume hood. They would start an experiment, walk away, and go sit at a desk or go sit at home and crunch the numbers, right? So there's That's the balance I think that everybody's trying to find is what do you really need to do inside space with others that we then as a corporation need to provide? And what can you do from Mars or whatever? And I think I think the people who are going to succeed the most at this are the ones that have figured out that balance because they've learned who their company is and how their company works. There are multiple divisions in Cisco. None of them work the same. None of them. But, my boss, Christian, and myself and others, my colleague, Faye, we're having discussions with these leaders on how they work. And we're modeling the space to that behavior. All the spaces don't look the same. They're not supposed to look the same. But we're also doing it in a way, they don't know this, but behind the scenes, we're doing it in a way that if something changes, we're not like, what are you going to do? So that goes back to how we started this conversation. We're trying to build in flexibility. We're trying to think of things like, can we solve the solution with furniture instead of standing up another wall? So we're trying to do the things behind the scenes that fit their need, but give us flexibility if something should change. And that's where the magic all comes together. When you can nail that, and then you do a change and you're like, wow, that wasn't a hard change. That's awesome. Because say a team moved to another floor or I don't know, whatever, and you were able to repurpose that space quickly, that's when you know you're getting there. At least for
How do you
me.
see the process changing? Because I think that, the whole concept of workplace strategy and trying to understand those needs and, sort of collect those and then begin to apply those to the physical environment. How do you see that working now?
This idea of a brief, this idea of meeting with leaders directly, it starts there for me, right? I think for too long, we built space that was a bit generic. It was meant to kind of be broad brushstroke and work for everybody. And space doesn't work that way. At least space now in 2025, it doesn't work that way. Except for space that is like, the cafeteria, event space. I'm not talking about that. The more the work specific spaces, right? A lot of people at Cisco are knowledge workers. A lot of people at a company are knowledge workers. They fall into the more generic category, right? They need open and closed space. They need quiet space, collaborative. That's the kind of standard mix. We approach that standard mix. I think I use this analogy on you, Bob, and it's going to date us, but we use it as like the old graphic equalizer on our stereo, right? There's only so many attributes in an office building. There really is. I mean, if we're honest with ourselves at a macro level, there's only so many attributes. Quiet rooms, 4-person rooms, major event space, cafeteria. There's only so many little attributes, right? So when we engage with leaders, we're just trying to figure out where the sliders are for their team. But we never let them do is drop a slider to 0. Because we've learned over the years, if somebody goes, I don't need quiet rooms. No one on my team needs a quiet room. It's like, well, actually, sometimes you do. Ray gets called from his doctor, or I don't know, maybe he wants some quiet space, right? So we never quite go to 0, right? So we're always like, well, you still might, but that also gives us that flexibility should the space change. But all that EQ is all being fed by leadership, right? So I don't know if this is answering your question personally, like perfectly, but that's the way I'm trying to do it now is saying, what's the input? We're trying to just like generically well, how about this? We're trying to have some intelligence that goes into every space that we build. Obviously, buildings tend to last longer than people sometimes, right? You'd be in a building for 20 years. Who made the decision 20 years ago may not be here 20 years later. But if we have flexibility in there and other kind of stuff, we have the opportunity to repurpose that space easier than we did before. So does that answer your question? Or?
Well, you said when we talked earlier that a lot of the sort of white papers that you saw about the change in the industry were oversimplified. And I think you're describing some of that complexity that's taking place.
Yeah. Sorry. Yeah. Okay. Yeah. I'm sorry. I pick up on that. I think so. I mean, no offense to LinkedIn, but I don't know how many, right? Every time it's starting to slow down, thank God. But it's just all these white papers about return to office, and they're so generic. Like if you owned a company and I owned a company, they're two different companies. You're a different leader than I am, right? Probably. We may align on 80% of the stuff, but that still leaves 20% of the stuff that we're different on. My strategy is going to be different than yours because of that 20%. There is no sort of generic, well, Jamie Dimon did this, so I'm going to do it. It's like, yeah, but what's your culture? Does that work for your employee? You have to think more broadly about this stuff. And what drives me crazy about some of these white papers is they don't go there. They're just like, this is how you do it. It's like, you don't even know who I am. You don't even know anything about my company, but you're going to tell me that's how I do it. Okay, gotcha. It doesn't work that way. The customers I engage with, friends that are in industry and stuff that are struggling with it, do not understand top down how their companies work, or aren't getting that line of sight, or aren't getting that understanding, or aren't able to take that line of sight and then put it into their workplace strategy. And they're just going like, well, I went to a conference and I heard Ray speak, so now I'm buying backplanes for all my credenzas. It's like, no, that's not the point. It's not the point at all. You have to do the heavy lift. And luckily for me, where I sit in Cisco, I work for a guy named Christian Bigsby, and he's an SVP. And he works for someone named Fran, who's an EV. So I'm two down from the ELT. So I get that line of sight. And if I don't get it, Christian gets it, right? So I get this top-down view. I know where we're going at a high level. I know what we're trying to accomplish and all that. And I'm enacting on that. And I also get to have these conversations with, leaders in our different business units and that kind of stuff. So I can do that step. And it's just because of where I sit in the org. If you don't sit there in the org, someone does. There's someone at that level of role, right? Get the insight from them. Like, don't just assume that you can, because you read about it, that's going to work for you. I think that's the great problem our industry is having right now and has been struggling with. Remember back when Google first started up, everybody was trying to out Google, right? It was like, that was like the saying back in 08, 2010. Now it's like everybody's trying to out RTO everybody. But they're just doing the same thing again. It's like, yeah, but you're not Google. Like, it works for them because they are Google. I feel like we haven't learned that lesson yet. Broad brushstrokes, people have not learned that lesson yet. It's really unfortunate.
No, well, you chatted about, I think, some of the change that's taken place at Cisco, post-pandemic, but I feel like we had an opportunity where we kicked everybody out of the office and had the chance to rethink what that work environment could be.
And that's what we tried to do. Smaller scale, and I'm not saying I did it perfectly. I'm not saying I did it right. I'm not saying any of that, but we focused on that. We were like, a couple months in, we were like, here's the opportunity of a lifetime. This is the moment. What are we going to do? And none of us knew. It was 3 months into that. We didn't know if we were ever going back. No one knew what was going on at all. But we didn't wait to learn that. We were like, okay, if we could do this differently, how would we do it? And I remember back then, we wrote a white paper. Christian and I wrote a white paper that went up to the ELT. We said, this is what we think we should do. It was even presented at the board. And we're kind of enacting that. Not exactly, not perfectly, not everything that was in there. But it gave us a direction of travel that said, we got to do this differently. We got to think about this differently. And that's all we're trying to do. And I want to stress, I am not saying I get it right all the time. I'm not saying we're perfect. I'm not saying any of that. But we're trying. We're really trying. And we're trying by really digging in on who we are as a company.
So what do you think are some of the most overlooked variables in the workplace?
It's going to sound like a totally push answer, but it's not about the workplace at all. It's never been about the workplace. It's about, your work practices, who you work for, what you're trying to accomplish. The workplace is just a tool to get all that done. And it would be amazing if we as workplace professionals stopped focusing so much on furniture and the actual space itself and started thinking more about that stuff. What's the business strategy? What are we trying to drive to? And really putting our heads into that. And then meeting with the people that are trying to deliver that and saying, what's a barrier for you? Bob, you're a senior researcher, you're a coder, I don't know, whoever you are. What's a barrier for you every day you're getting your job done? And then using space, determining how space can help solve some of those problems for that person.
Well, and I think the theme that you've kind of presented in this conversation has been about leadership.
Yeah.
And you're trying to understand how leaders work. You're trying to understand what their values are. You obviously sat there and listened to them describe what they needed.
Yeah. Yeah. And, yes, that's what I'm trying to figure out. And I'm also I'm really educating myself on who we are as a company. What do we do? Where are we succeeding? What are we trying to push into? What areas aren't working? Why aren't they working? And then use space as a tool where I can to help those people solve that problem. It's not just 4 walls and a desk and free coffee. That's not going to help anybody solve a problem anymore. In fact, it never did. That's the other thing, right? I think we're realizing it never did solve any problems. It became about the coffee. The coffee wasn't solving problems.
Yeah.
Everybody needs coffee, I get it. But it's not solving any problems, right? So, but it's a component. If you put it as a component of the overall solution, yeah, then maybe it is.
Cool. Well, if you are looking out and you want to make a recommendation to somebody about, how their organization should begin the process, how would you describe that?
Yeah. Um, I would start with a top down, making sure you have a top down understanding of who your company is, what they're in business to do, where they're succeeding, where they're not succeeding, what are they struggling with, right? And just forget space completely for a minute. Just go through your process of, do I know who we are and who we are, what we're trying to do, where we're trying to go? Do I understand how our leaders lead? Do I understand our culture? Do I understand just the basic who the heck we are, right? How we work, what we do. Then apply that and look at the spaces you already have already have in your portfolio and say, okay, knowing that and knowing what spaces have high attendance, low attendance, this, that, I don't know, whatever it is, the data we normally use as workplace people, try to look for correlations in that and say, well, no wonder that space isn't working. Well, of course, this space is working. And then go and interview. Really, it's a whole education thing before you even think that you can mention workplace strategy. Because if you don't know all that, then what is your workplace strategy based on? It's based on what the industry is doing. Okay. But maybe that doesn't matter for who you are. Hey, the industry's all back when we first met, Bob. The industry's all going activity-based working, so I have to do that. It's like, but do you? Just because everybody else did it? Like, do you really? And we at GSK did it at the time because we just weren't seeing cross business unit collaboration. Bob sat on the 5th floor, Ray sat on the 6th floor. They never spoke. But I was in product development and you're in marketing. Yet we never spoke. It's like, how insane is that? Like, we need to make these connections. So we got rid of the floors. We got everybody together. Essentially, that's why we did. And we saw huge dividends from that. We saw people working across the aisle. We saw them doing the whole kind of a thing, right? So there was a reason to that. It wasn't just like, hey man, everybody else is doing it. Let's do that and we can get rid of 1 million square feet. But what was interesting in doing that is we got rid of over 1 million square feet. We realized we never needed all that space. And no one ever spoke to each other. There were so many people. That was a fascinating thing. I remember the first couple of weeks we were open, around the time you guys came in, and just seeing people be like, "Oh, you work here?" Like it never, because we were in a huge tower. Like no one ever saw anybody. You got in the elevator, you beeline to your spot, you hung out with the people around you, you're out of there. Never interacted with people. So yeah, that was an eye opener, that project for sure back in the day, and it really kind of set the tone for me on understanding. It's more than the building, right? Yes, the building helps when it's a lovely space and it's mod. Of course it helps. But you have to know all this other stuff or you can't possibly succeed in when you're building space. You just can't do it. Maybe you're going to win an award for the space, but that's not what I'm in business for. That's not my job, is to win an award,
Interesting.
Yeah.
Hey, I want to be respectful of your time. This has been a great conversation. Anything that we
could talk all day, Bob, you and I. I think we've done this before. We talk all day. Yeah.
Anything we've left out that you think is important to include?
No, I mean, I just hope that this isn't coming across like that I think I know everything, because I don't. But I just think that our job, people, when we build space, the different trades that do what we do, if we don't know why we're building the space, I don't understand why we're building anything. And I think for too long, it's been, well, we got that building is 30 years old and it's crappy. Let's build a new one. Okay. That is a reason, by the way. It's like, yeah, needs a refresh. But it has to be more than that. It's got to be more than that. Especially today, right? We're all competing with what's like behind you and what's behind me. There's better food here at my house. There's better everything, right? So it's got to be a reason for me to go in. There has to be something, and for me, and I go in, to different offices around the country, around the world. It's because of connection to leadership, connection to culture. I go in for events. I go in for those things. My team is literally all over the world, literally, my directs, right? So I don't have an office. I can't go to an office and be sitting with all of them. It doesn't exist in my world, right? Because I'm in a true global role. I mean, I got people everywhere, and getting them together is tough, right? Because I'm across multiple time zones and that kind of stuff. But I'm not the norm at all. I'm more senior in the organization. That's why I have the organization I do. I have a lot of my org is partners. It's not full-time people. I'm in a unique situation. People like me still need to go in because I'm a leader in the org, right? To go in and see other people to interact, to do the thing. That's a leadership expectation that I put on myself, let alone that Cisco puts on me. But other people are on product teams and development teams and whatever, right? Go in and they need to be together as teams at certain times. And we talked about those highly collaborative moments, highly problem solving moments, that kind of stuff. Our job is to know how they work and create space for them to do that in. And there is no way everybody works the same way. They don't. By the way, I'm also not suggesting that everything looks wildly different because it doesn't. There are still commonalities, right? So you bring in the commonalities, but then you give the differentiators. And you cannot possibly know that until you get into the heads of these people and see how they work. And doing like a 1-day interview, be like, I got a couple questions, like doing a survey. That's not going to cut it. You have to, we've all learned people say one thing, but they mean something else. I do this. And then you follow them around. And you're like, well, you didn't do that. You don't do that. You actually do it totally different than that. Oh, I do? So like you have to get in the heads of people. It's back to old user-centered design, right? The old 80s, 90s term that I don't think we use anymore, but it was all the user-centered design stuff back in the day. Literally following people around with the clipboard and being like, that's interesting. Bob said he's never on the phone, yet he's taken 14 phone calls today. It's that kind of stuff. So yeah, I hope that helps.
No, well, Ray, this has been great. I know you're busy. Thanks. I really appreciate you taking the time to have this conversation.
Oh, no, thanks to you, Bob. I really appreciate having the chance to speak.